Impact Teams Radio. Welcome to Impact Teams Radio, the show where we explore what it takes to be a leader of the leaders in corporate America. Get ready to be inspired and discover proven tips for going from average to exceptional. Now, here's your host and guide, Tony Sherman.
Hello, and this is Tony Sherman from Impact Teams Radio. This week, I'm very pleased to welcome a returning guest from a couple of weeks ago, Andrew Moore from the Table Group. And Andrew shared his story with us, but now what we're going to do is to do a bit of a deep dive in what he's doing currently with the Table Group. Andrew, welcome back.
Thanks, Tony. It's great to be here.
Thank you. And your focus, if I got it right, Andrew, is organizational development with the Table Group. Is that correct?
I think it starts with organizational development, but there's elements of sort of the strategy that organizations are doing as well that comes out of that. I think organizational development as a field, especially academically as a field, has got a bit of a soft and fluffy reputation, and I don't think anything could be further from the truth as far as what it is that we do. But as a technical basis, I think organizational development comes closest.
Okay, then let's get crisp here, because crisp is what people look for. If you step back and I was an organization, how would you explain to me the value proposition that the Table Group would bring to me, and how would you see yourself first engaging with me as a potential customer?
Well, what we do with the Table Group specifically is what we call organizational health, which is a broader concept than organizational development. But it's really quite simple. So let me make it clear and crisp, as you put it. What we do is we help leadership teams, the teams at the top of an organization, we help them become a functional team together. So if the leadership team at the top aren't functional, then they're really unable to do anything of use or of service to the rest of their organization. So the first step is let's get the team cohesive at the top. So a cohesive leadership team is the first thing that we will work on with an organization. And once we've got that team into a cohesive state, or even while we're building that team into a cohesive state, we start the process of creating some clarity for the organization around what it is that they are trying to achieve. So we move them through a process of answering some questions about their organization, and the 6 questions that we get them to answer. First is, why do we exist, or what's the underlying purpose of our organization? What are the key behaviors that are going to be influential in us being successful that we want to drive through our organization? What do we do with some clarity and succinctness so that we know what we don't do? What are the key elements of our strategy, or the strategic anchors that are going to keep us in place so that when we're making decisions anywhere in the organization, we can make sure that we're in alignment? And what's the most important focus of our organization right now? So what's the temporary focus, the thing that we need to achieve in the shorter term as a whole group? That's 5. The 6th one is who's going to do what. So clarifying who's going to do what within the team. So if we can spend some time getting clarity around those 6 questions with the team, at the same time as generating some cohesiveness in the team, then we're starting to make some progress towards that organizational health that we focus on. I should add in here, as far as the Table Group is concerned, the Table Group is built around the work of Patrick Lencioni, and Pat is actually the leader of our organization. He's the president of the Table Group. So in effect oversees me. And many of these ideas, almost all of these ideas that we're talking about today, are probably going to be held in one of his books, if anyone's interested after the fact.
Okay, thanks. And actually, I'll reach out to you after the show, get some links, and we'll post them with the show notes.
Right.
So thank you, Andrew. Okay, so if I'm working in a team, the first dissonance that I see with what you just said is most leadership groups think they're functional. No, from my experience, 30 years in the industry, I've never been in a leadership group that looks around and says, we're pretty dysfunctional. Let's go get some help.
You make an excellent point. As a matter of fact, one of the models that we use most regularly, one of Pat's models, called the 5 dysfunctions of a team model, which we use to make the team functional. We have a lot of people don't like the word dysfunction of a team, so much so that in recent iterations of the model, we call them the 5 behaviors of a team, and we just reverse them onto the positive. So then the teams can see themselves as checking the box of how much are we doing this, rather than there needing to be a problem originally. The way that people come to us is quite often they've read something, so they've read a book or they've got an idea, so they've got to be aware that they've got something that they want to improve before we're going to have an opportunity to help them. So there is an element of we can't help someone that doesn't think that they have a challenge. So you make a good point. And I don't know how many organizations there are out there that would really, really benefit from someone coming and talking with them about the cohesiveness of the team or the functionality of the team. I'll try and get away from the organizational development language. There isn't anybody, I think there's a lot of teams that would really see advantage in working out better ways of how to talk to each other, how to make decisions as a group, how to run their meetings better. These are the tactical things that are actually involved in what we do. And these processes of how does a team go through the gathering of information for themselves, and then the process of taking advantage of the skills and the experience and the knowledge that each of the people in the team have, and bring that to bear on the problem that the team faces. And then how do they make a decision once they've put all those different opinions out there and put all that different information? And then how do they commit to that decision as a group in a way that sticks? And how do they hold each other accountable so that the team can be all going in the same direction? And it's really tactical stuff. It's not complicated. One of the table group's philosophy is simple wisdom for business, because this stuff, these people that I sit in rooms with, these leadership teams that I sit in rooms with, they're always relatively senior. They've got to be senior enough to understand that they have a problem and to not have their egos affronted by having that problem. And it's normally only relatively senior people that are comfortable enough with themselves to ask for help. So we've already got smart people. They've already spent quite often a long time in the corporate world, and they know what a good team looks like, and they know what a team that's not working very well looks like. And they know that it's a function of the team as a whole, not a function of any one of the individuals. There's a great study. There's a great study that came out of the Center for Collective Intelligence in MIT, and they've done this study on team dynamics, and they basically took a bunch of individuals, mostly grad students, I expect, and they tested them for how well they make decisions as individuals through a process similar to an IQ test, but it's like a rational problem-solving process. And then they've worked out how to collectively assess groups doing the same test. And what they found was there was no correlation between the success of the individuals in the process and the success of the groups that they were in. And what that means is when you put a group of people together, they can become smarter or they can become dumber, which is amazing to think about when you get your head around that you can actually take a team of people, and because of the dynamics in that group, you can actually create an environment where they will be better off to make the decisions by themselves than they would be to make them together.
So what I'm hearing, though, in that whole cadence, I hear you with a challenge, but it sounds like if I'm a busy team leader in a corporation, that you're going to ask me to slow down. And I'm not sure I got the time to slow down. How do you get people to buy into slowing down? Or am I wrong? Do you not need people to slow down?
Well, it's a tricky balance, because there is an element of slowing down in it, but it's more mental slowing down than physical slowing down. We also make sure that all of our sessions are extremely fast-paced. So the session itself moves quickly through a lot of different processes, partially because some processes resonate more and less with different groups. And we don't spend a lot of time on diagnosis outside of the room. We normally let the processes identify where the challenges are, and then we resolve them as we see them. Because until you have a team and actually experience their dynamics, the processes that are going on in there are really hard to ascertain. Your slow down thing is a really important point, so I'm glad you raised the tone. The key to group involvement and group functionality is in the listening, not in the talking. And I know that that's a platitude, but let me delve a little deeper into it. I was sitting in a team in Singapore 2 days ago, and one of the exercises that we were doing was everybody go around the table and share with the whole table your thoughts on a particular topic. We're talking about the elements of an organization that are smart and the elements that are healthy and healthy focused, and which ones of these elements do you think that this current organization was more focused on at the moment. And everybody had to share. And the reason that I was getting everybody to share was because if everybody shares, then at least the group's aware of what everybody thinks. So the purpose, it's really a listening exercise. So I went up to one of the tables and I said, has everybody here, have you shared with everybody? Like, are you done? And one lady said, well, I'm done. I've had my go. So my answer to her was, well, that's because you think your go is the talking. If you were to understand fully that your actual go or your turn is the listening, then you couldn't have had your go until you've heard everybody. And as long as you see your job as talking, then we're really not going to win here. This team's not going to be functional. This team will be functional when everybody sees their job as listening, not as talking. Because that's when we all get to take the benefit of the other individuals in the team. But that does mean slowing down mentally, which is returning to your original question. If you can slow yourself down mentally, and someone said it to me really well a few days ago, if you can prepare yourself so that what other people say, and allow what other people say to change your mind, just be ready to change your mind and to change your perspective on the basis of what other people say. It's more than listening. It's listening with the intent to change. It's a real active, open listening that needs to happen for a team to become functional. Now, in the overall sense of time, I think the same 20 minutes can be spent, A, going through a cycle of hearing from everybody and everybody working through active listening to understand the perspective of everybody else, especially the leader that will eventually make the decision. Or you can spend that same 20 minutes with the most dominant people in the room and the most dominant people in the team, dumping their opinions on top of each other and counterpoint and counterpoint like democracy or like the UN, where everybody's advocating and nobody's inquiring, to put it in the words of Chris Argyris. And all you end up with is a whole bunch of opinions that contradict each other and no one sought to really understand any of them. And all of those opinions are wasted. So from a time perspective, slowing down the process or creating some process to take advantage of that 20 minutes most fulfillingly does take some practice. And then from the leader's perspective, the busy leader's perspective, it does have to be a conscious effort to change the process of how we communicate and how we come to group decisions. But as far as the amount of time it takes up in the meeting, I don't think that changes on an ongoing basis. I think it just massively changes the effectiveness of the same 20 minutes.
I'm blown away because it literally is a different framework of changing from advocate to inquirer. It's just that simple. And when you use those words, I was like, and your story was very powerful. I'm done when I finish listening, not when I finish talking. That's really powerful stuff. Does that have a transformational effect on the groups that you're working on? Are they as jazzed about it as I am right now?
I think they get jazzed about the idea. And when we spend 2 days with the team, we've got a lot of that concept is driven home really hard in different ways and using a table group, more of a table group language of the process of gathering information and then making decisions as a group. And that's all part of the gathering information. And Chris uses a lot of Chris Argyris, which is that advocacy inquiry thing when he's determining group size. So Pat talks a lot about that. In the group, though, the challenge with a group, and I think we talked about it in an interview a couple of weeks ago, the challenge with a group is not what they know, it's what they do. And you've got to understand that a group's dynamics is a little bit part of their conscious decision making, but the overwhelming majority of it is happening sort of at the subliminal level, at the subconscious level. And some of it's habit and some of it's culture and some of it's sort of organizational culture and cultural norming that comes from the team and the history of the team. And some of it's interpersonal, as in my comfort level with the other individuals in the room. And all of these things are happening below the surface. You're not aware of them. So yes, the answer is they are definitely blown away with that as a concept, but readily applying it to yourself is much harder. So in a 2-day session with a leadership team, we'll spend an hour at the start basically putting all the concepts out there, and then we'll spend the rest of the 2 days actually trying to practice it and trying to have it become more normal to do, because intellectually, everybody, like you and I, get it straight away. But I really still struggle with listening. Listening is not, I am not a great listener. And I work really hard at it. And every time I push a little bit harder to become a better listener, I'm rewarded. I'm just rewarded. I learn so much faster. People like me a lot more. I'm more enjoyable to be around. As they say, interested is interesting at the social level. So it's a really big reward for it, but it is a lot of effort as well. And it's not a natural inclination for leaders. The natural inclination is as soon as the pressure comes on, is that they advocate. Like as soon as it's important, everybody starts lumping their opinions in because that's what they were hired for. They were hired because they were smart. They were hired for all of these experience and to bring their experience to bear on the problems that the team have. So they almost feel like it's their job to advocate their position, to advocate, to bring forward their best for the team. It's culturally seen as their job. It's team dynamics seen as their job. It's what we talk about in interviews, like what can you bring to the table, to help this team. So we think that our contribution is about our talking. Our contribution is about our telling. And as long as we see contribution as advocation, then we're not going to really get into the spirit of inquiring. So it's a really big philosophical shift that needs to be undone at a really base level. So understanding it's not enough because you weren't doing it intentionally to start with. You were doing it subconsciously. So you need to get to the root of why subconsciously were you doing it before you can get to the change of behavior. It's not enough to change the intention. You've got to change the underlying psychology of the individuals. That they can do manually, but it does take time and practice.
Right, and effectively that's what you just said, where when you go into a group, they're all smart people, they get what you're doing, you effectively can synopsize the process in an hour, but then it's modeling it, so they can see it failing themselves and continually iterate and get positive, presumably quick feedback until they get to the point where they say, okay, now when I leave the room, I can at least start to do this with my team.
Exactly. I can start to do it with, exactly right. The funny thing that happens, Tony, is they all understand this and they all think that it's great, and then they get to know each other and they build all this trust. And then towards the end of the first day I quite often run an exercise that's around what's the challenges that this team faces as a starting blow to start talking about how we're going to get clarity around our most important goals and what have you. And as soon as we enter it, we move from all this lovely philosophical OD language and here's how we're going to develop team culture and blah, blah, blah. And we move to this moment of now we're going to talk about some challenges. What are the key challenges facing the team? It's like everyone immediately forgets and they start talking over the top of each other and and no one's listening and no one's heard. And then you've got to drag them back to talking about the process as well as the content. So you've got to go, okay, let's park all that content and now let's talk about the process that we just went through, what happened. And then it's like a light comes on. And then they realize, we do that. Yes, we are, that is us. That's not conceptually other people and other teams. That's us. We do that. Now, how are we going to fix it? And it becomes very real.
Yeah, that makes, I can just see that. In fact, that happens in my own personal life, in my own marriage. Quite often I will say something that I think is wrong, not realizing it's one of my habits, and my wife will just gently reflect it back to me. And I'm like, oh, that's me. It's actually me who does that. And we just don't see ourselves sometimes as doing the stuff that we all agree. Everybody else shouldn't do that, not realizing that I'm doing it right now.
Yeah. Yes. So we're in so little control of ourselves, really. So much of what we do is automated that you could have an entire career just based on gaining an understanding of the bits of you that are automated and helping people sort of manage the drivers that they can't see because they're so well hidden from us. Like our underlying drivers are so well hidden from us. We don't get to see them at all.
Okay, Andrew, we've run out of time. This is absolutely fascinating. I just want to share an insight for our listeners that I had that I'm going to use in my next job interview. I'm going to work on it assiduously in this company that I'm with, because I'm with a great company. But if I go for another job interview, when people say to me, what is the value that you bring? I'm going to strive to be the kind of person that says, I am an inquirer. I find out the best in the smart people you've already hired, and I bring it out and I make the group think better than the individuals. I think that's a huge value add for anyone.
I'd hire you.
Well, on that note, I think we better not go any further before I bury myself. So, Andrew Moore, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome, Tony. Thank you.
So, for those of you who don't know, you can go back onto Impact Teams Radio, have a look at the previous interview we did with Andrew. Andrew and I are going to put some links on here so you can find out more about the Table Group and how they can potentially add value to your organization. And you can just read about some of the great work they've done. Andrews, thank you so much again for joining us today.
You're welcome, Tony.
And until next time, this is Tony Sherman, your host with Impact Teams Radio.
That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Now go and apply these few gems. Make the wisdom you have heard your own. If you want to be part of our launch success, then please go to impactteamsradio.com/love and tell the world. If you want more and never want to miss a beat, please go to impactteamsradio.com/subscribe. If you have 3 minutes, we would love to see a positive review on iTunes. And until next time, remember to act on what you've learned, and you'll be ahead of most of the world. Impact Teams Radio.